A vigilante attack in Italy leads to a tragic consequence. And then we travel out to California to meet a young girl who's saved up some money and bought herself a horse. She likes to brush its hair, ride it around the family farm, and feed it oats. But little does she know that her days with this horse are numbered, because there is a paranormal force that's willing to make a bargain from beyond. Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a lot of stuff to cover today, so first off, riding into Dead Rabbit Command on a horse of his own. Everyone give it up to Legacy Patreon supporter Justin Mosier. Woohoo, yeah, wee-hee, ha-ha, giddy up. Riding that horse on into Dead Rabbit Command. It's a good horse and a good Patreon supporter. Justin, you're going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the Patreon, I totally understand. I really do. Money is tight. But another way you can help support the show is by spreading the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. Also, if you want to help support the show, I'm currently, an interview between me and Dr. Kelly Schutz is playing on the Paraflix network. Paraflix is a streaming service for paranormal content. They're doing a 3-day free trial. After that, it's $3.99 a month, and you can go to Disembodied Voices and watch the video of me being interviewed by Dr. Kelly Schutz. It was a lot of fun doing the interview. I'm glad that we're up there. Go ahead and check that out. All those links are going to be in the show notes. Justin, leave your horse. We should have an animal at Dead Rabbit Radio. We should have like an animal that we... Justin Mosier, I'm going to go ahead and hand you a saddle. Everyone get on board the hare horse. Gonna climb up on the saddle. Come on, little partner. We're all on this poor horse is like, oh, my spine. There's a bunch of people sitting on it, or even just me. I wonder what the weight limit is to ride on a horse. I'm sure, whatever it is, I'm sure I'm over it. But come on, get on this horse. The hare horse, it's half rabbit, half horse, all crippling back pain. Justin, go ahead and gallop us out of Dead Rabbit Command. We're riding all the way out to Italy. Cloppity clop clop, cloppity clop clop, cloppity clop clop clop. Sounds like the Crypt Keeper. For some reason, you're going to get a lot of horse sound effects on that second story too, so if you have kids nearby, tell them it is not the Crypt Keeper coming for them. We ride all the way out to Italy. Specifically, we're headed to Crotone, Italy, a coastal city in this beautiful country. I got to give a shout out to Italian. At this point, I mean, he sends us all this stuff from Italy. Longtime listener, longtime friend of the show, Fabio Nurbon. I dox him every single time. I'm like, oh, this dude lives in Italy. If anyone's looking for him, he's in Italy. Great guy. We've been conversing over the years. Really great guy. Sends me a bunch of stuff. And I don't know much about Italy. I know that shocks most of you guys. I don't know a lot about Italy. So when I saw this story took place in Crotone, Italy, which I honestly don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I said, I want to do a little research, right? I could have just looked at it and started the story. But I go, I don't know nothing about Crotone. Maybe there's some cool stuff down there. And there is. So back in the day, we went back to Crotone, Italy, but we're going back to the time of ancient Italy. Before the Romans, right? This was like Greek dudes hanging out. You can hear the hesitation in my voice. I don't know when the Roman Empire really rose to power. But anyways, ancient Italy, Crotone was known for two things. Producing some of the strongest men in the world at that time. Most Olympians, I won't say like they won every event, but a lot of Olympic strength winners, like wrestling and picking up boulders and stuff like that, came from Crotone. They were known for having really strong, really athletic people. They were also known for being awesome doctors. And you're like, well, that would, being strong back then, a dime a dozen, right? Everyone could push a boulder up a hill. I don't know what's taken that Sisyphus guy so much Just push it up. Just keep pushing. Strength is dope, but it's not the end-all be-all. But if you were in the ancient world, if you were known as producing the best doctors, like how many doctors were there back then? Probably like 1,000. For the whole world, you probably had like 1,000 dudes who are like, I know medicine. And I was like, that's pretty cool that you had a lot of doctors come out of this town. And then I read the reason why. So Herodotus, he was this dude, he was this historian who wrote a bunch of ancient stuff, right? He was basically like the gossip dude of ancient Greece. He's always like, you guys got any stories for me? I don't know why I made him sound like a creep. He's some pervert peeking in people's windows. They're like, Herodotus, I have a story for you. And he's like, I'll get to you in a second. Apparently, this king had a dislocated ankle. He's like, my ankle, can anyone do anything for it? And people are like throwing leeches at him. And he's like, that's not helping. I lost a lot of weight, but that's not helping. And people are like shaking sage over his head. And they're like, Zeus, save this dude's ankle. And he's like, that's not helping either. Well, a dude from Croatoan came and said, oh, his ankle's dislocated. They probably didn't know what dislocated. It was probably the first time that word was ever used. They're like, what does that mean? And he popped it back into place. And the king goes, what, dude? That's super dope. Thanks. Where'd you come from? And the guy's like, Croatoan. And he goes, forever and ever will Croatoan be known for having awesome doctors. Also, Croatoan was involved in a lot of big battles back then. So remember, like a lot of Olympians came from Croatoan. There was a dude named Milo. He was a wrestler. Well, when Croatoan was going to battle with someone, they go, who are we going to have lead our forces? They had an army of 100,000 men. Milo, this wrestler, goes, I'll do it. I will be your general. I'll get the enemy general in a figure 4, and he will submit until the Rage in the Cage match somewhere down in Sicily. So in the front of 100,000 troops, you had Milo, and not only was he wearing all of his Olympic wreaths, that's what they had back then. I don't know, like if they were like precariously balanced on his head. So when he was running into battle, you would go, whoa, dude, that guy won like 10 Olympics. Not only that, you're probably more worried about the arrow buried in your heart. You're like, can I get your autograph? Not only would you realize that this guy was an Olympian, he also dressed like Hercules. He was cosplaying in the middle of a war, and he won. It would be scary if you were fighting a bunch of soldiers, and then all of a sudden, in front of him, you realize Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin dressed as Superman was leading them. You'd be like, I'm out. You're like, Jason, what does any of this have to do? Is this the vigilante story? Is this what we're talking about? The vigilante story is actually so depressing. I'm glad that I found these tidbits. Milo, who I feel like we talked about it on the show before. Maybe I just researched it. Maybe it was a fact I had in my head. But Milo, the wrestler, was this super strong dude. And he was always competing in the Olympics. And he had a very peculiar training plan. Because, there's 4 years between each Olympics. So he's like, I got to start getting ready for the Olympics. As he's all pushing these dead bodies off of him, he's like, well, that battle's over. 4 more years to the Olympics. What he would do is he would get a baby cow and he'd put it on his back. And he'd start running around town. And everyone's like, oh, I guess the Olympics are going to start in 4 years. Just saw Milo walk by with a baby cow. And he would carry it on his back for 4 years. So by the time, this sounds like a fairy tale. This sounds like something like Rumpelstiltskin would do. Milo would carry a baby cow on his back. So within 4 years, by the time he's ready for the next Olympics, it was a 4-year-old cow. It was this giant cow that he was running around with on his back. And then he would run into the Olympic arena carrying this 4-year-old cow. And when he got to the other end of the Olympic arena, he would throw it on the ground, stab it in the neck, cook it, and then eat it. Which is, come on, that's the best entrance ever. I love wrestling. I've seen a lot of wrestling entrances over the years. Never has Hulk Hogan run in with a 4-year-old cow and eaten it in the middle of the square circle. So that was his training regime. I'm sure he did other stuff. And I'm also sure like he took rest days. He's like, no, not today. He throws the cow's all walking away. He's like, what? I've never touched the ground before. His legs are all wobbly. He's like, no. You can't leave my house I'm just taking a rest day. And then he throws it back on. I'm sure like he fed it. It wasn't like a skeletal cow. I don't know if he like kept it. I'm sure he took it off sometimes when he's like going to the bathroom. He's like, puts the cow down. That's how you know he's in the bathroom. There's a cow outside an outhouse. You're like, oh, Milo's in there. He probably didn't sleep with it either. I'm sure it like walked around and ate hay. But then he'd go and he'd be like, oh, time to go to work. And he picks up a giant cow, puts it on his back. And he would do that every 4 years. I don't know if that's necessarily true. It sounds made up. And this is why I think we talked about him on the show before, because I know I do weird deaths, and I remember reading this. Milo, when I was reading the stuff about Croatoan, reading about these battles, and whenever they'd bring up Milo, there to be a picture or a painting or a sculpture of a wolf eating. I was like, I gotta find out what is going on. It was always a picture of Milo screaming in pain as a wolf had its head buried in his butt cheeks. If you think I'm making it up, I'll put them in the show notes. You're like, Jason, I don't want to. YouTube's definitely going to shut it down. Your non-safe for work links. Apparently, Milo died because he wanted to see if he could split a tree stump with his hands because he was so strong. So some guy was trying to split a tree stump with an axe, and he goes, hey, good sir. Milo's eating a hamburger. He's like, it takes a while to eat a whole cow. He's like, nom, nom. Good sir, now that I've had my daily hamburger, I want to see if I can rip this tree stump in half. And I see you have this wedge in here. I'm going to stick my hand into the tree stump. You take the wedge out, and then I'm going to try to pull it apart. And the guy's like, yeah, sure. That sounds insane and impossible, but you carry a cow every day, and you led that army. So Milo stuck his hand in the tree stump, and they pulled the wedge out, and the lumberjack left to go pick something up or something like that. Probably a camera. He's probably about to invent the first camera to memorialize this moment. And as Milo's hand was stuck in this tree stump, he couldn't pull it out. He wasn't strong enough to rip the stump in two. A wolf showed up. A wolf showed up and buried its head in his butt cheeks and ate him. There's another version of the story that it was a lion that did it, but really at that point you're just kind of, he got eaten alive butt first. It wouldn't matter what was back there. A gang of squirrels, you'd be like, this is a little more humiliating, but in the end, eaten alive butthole first. So that's the story of Milo. Fabio did not recommend any of this, by the way. Do not put this in his doorstep. You're like, don't send Jason stories where people get eaten alive, especially anus first, please. Now we're in modern day Croatoan. We're in modern times. It's August 11th, 2022, and the 17-year-old girl and a couple of her relatives are hanging out in the city center of Croatoan, and the reason why is someone has been approaching her online. It doesn't specifically say like how sexual the conversations got, but it was definitely inappropriate. It was inappropriate to the point where this girl, she's underage, she's feeling uneasy because somebody wants to meet her, someone's talking about, how much they love her and all of this stuff. And oddly enough, the profile is under her ex-boyfriend's name. It's not her ex-boyfriend, but it has the same name. So it felt targeted in a way. And just like we have in America, we have, pedophile hunters. We have these groups that they pose to be underage kids. And they wait for someone to approach them. This is kind of the opposite. She was just minding her own business on social networks. This dude approached her. And they didn't know who it was. They knew it wasn't the ex-boyfriend. They didn't know who it was, though, but they figured it was a creeper. So she shows up in the city center with some relatives because she's there to meet this guy. And her relatives are about to, rough him up a bit, talking to this underage girl. And they're texting each other, right? There's a ton of people in this area. And this young girl, they don't give her name, we'll call her Tiffany. Tiffany is chatting with the dude, with the catfish guy. Where are you? I'm in the city center. I'd love to meet you. And getting chat back. Yeah, look, I'm here, but I can't see you anywhere. And they're chatting back and forth. And her family are trying to figure out exactly where he's at. And then eventually he says, well, I'm wearing a white t-shirt and blue jeans, and I have a hat on. And Tiffany and her relatives see him. They see him. White t-shirt, blue jeans, hat on. He's in the city center. One of her relatives, a man named Niccolo Passaquaqua, walks up and begins beating up this man. This adult man who had been talking to his relative. Again, there's a lot of translation stuff. They didn't specify like if it was the niece or the sister. I don't think it was a sister, but he starts beating the guy up, beats him so badly, puts him into a coma. This young man named David Ferrario, who's 21 years old, is in a coma. And he's been in a coma since August 11th, 2022. The doctor said he'll never come out of the coma. He's on life support. Well, I guess you can be in a coma probably without life support, right? Like, as long as you're breathing on your own. But the doctor's like, that's neither here nor there. David is never waking up. He's in this coma permanently. And you go, well, this is a weird story because David Ferrario had no idea who this girl was. He was not the person who was texting with her this whole time. In that crowd was another man. The man who was having an inappropriate online relationship with Tiffany. A man named Alessandro Curto, 31 years old. And when he was in the city center, he realized this was a setup. Because he knew what she looked like. She didn't know what he looked like. He saw all of her photos. He realized that this was a setup. He realized that he was about to get beat down. So, out of a crowd of people, he picked one, completely randomly, and texted Tiffany, I'm wearing a baseball cap, a white shirt, and jeans. The same clothes that David was wearing. That's tragic and terrifying. Right? Imagine you are just in public and all of a sudden a bunch of people start accosting you for a crime you did not commit. Not only did you not commit, you didn't even know it was happening. You're just out there for the day. So people come up and start, why are you talking to my niece? Why are you pedophile, you pervert, and all this stuff. And you have no idea what's going on. And the next thing you know, you get punched once, punched twice. You fall to the ground, hit your head. And you're in a coma, a permanent coma. This case is currently going on. And obviously, Niccolo is being charged with assault. He's being charged with assault, very serious assault because the guy is in a coma. They use the term irreversible coma. Also being charged is Alessandro, the pervert, because he's the one who picked him out. He's the one who said, that's the guy. He picked someone at random, and that dude got beat up, put in a coma. He's also being charged with assault. And it's more than just assault. It's like a higher charge. But again, because I was taking this, and Fabio, thank you so much. I found this such a fascinating article. He goes, I know you have a big thing for vigilantes. I found this one. It's a crazy story. Plus, I got to do some historical research on the city. It's more than just assault, right? But I took an Italian article and had to translate it to English, and there obviously was some. It didn't tell me exactly what the charge would be in the Italian legal system. The girl, Tiffany, who we named her, she's also facing charges, and another relative who was on the scene is also facing charges. But their trials apparently have not started yet. But a completely tragic story and avoidable at so many steps, right? Alessandro should have never been interacting with the girl in the first place. That's the first avoidable thing. And, well, I guess it's all really is all on him in a sense, and then he shouldn't have sicked them on this young man. I get wanting to take vengeance. I get wanting to beat someone up, but putting a dude in a coma. That, I mean, I might be going out on a limb here, but that's a little too much, guys. But sometimes we're in that gray area, right? Where someone hasn't done enough that the police are going to get involved, but they've done enough to make you want to get involved. But I'm sure, I mean, I obviously don't know any of these people. I'm sure that Nicolo, the guy who beat up David, is, I mean, talk about guilt, right? If you could logically say, yeah, I put a guy in a permanent coma, but he was perving on my female relative. He was perving on this young girl. And I'm going to do 15 years for this, but it could have ended up a lot worse. But to think that I beat an innocent man into a coma that he'll never come out of. That's just crazy. It's just so sad. It was interesting. I don't think I've ever told this story on the podcast. Last year, I was hanging out with my mom out in Sacramento. I go there every month. Not every month. I go there every year for a vacation. We're sitting in a Starbucks. And it was crowded, right? It's a crowded Starbucks. And there was this older man, he's probably like in his 60s, talking to a couple other people who are probably around the same age, maybe 50s, 60s, a little bit younger. I'm there with my mom, place is crowded, and all of a sudden this dude bursts through the door and then walks up to this old man. I say old, right? He's only like 10 years older than me. Or, I'll be 47 in October. 13 years older than me. He walks up, and the old man, again, he was graying and bald, but he was relatively fit. He looked like he was keeping himself in shape, bicycling or something like that. And then this young man comes in who looks homeless, who looks disheveled, but maybe in his 20s. He comes in and walks right up to that old man and go, "You calling me a pervert? You calling me a pervert?" And it's so loud, and everyone kind of looks so. Obviously, you're going to look over. You're not going to be like, that's just boring. What's happening behind me? I want a cake pop. Obviously, everyone turned to look, and the guy was sitting there with these friends, and he goes, What are you talking about? And the guy's like, "You calling me a pervert? You calling me a pervert? You're always saying that I'm molesting kids," and stuff like that. We're like, what in the world is going on? So I get up and I motion to my mom. I was like, "Come on, let's walk over here." Because we were like right next to it. We were right next to it. I was like, I thought he was talking to me. Because I did call him a pervert. And I did say he was a sex offender. No, he walks up to this guy and starts going, "You call me a pervert?" And this old man goes, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" And this young guy kept going, "You called me a pervert. You called me a pervert." And that old dude stood up and started going, "You want to do something? You want to do something?" And then I was like, oh my God, we're about to watch a battle of the ages. Literally, who's going to win, a 20-year-old man or a 60-year-old man? And now they're both screaming at each other. And the people at his table are kind of like, at the older man's table are kind of like, it's okay. Like they were afraid that a big brawl is going to take off, but they didn't get physically in the middle of it, right? They're just kind of like, "No, dude, no, it's okay. It's okay." Because maybe they know, maybe this guy has a reputation for, maybe he has a reputation for calling homeless people perverts and then beating them up. The young homeless man walked outside and the older man was like, "What in the world was that?" And obviously he's super amped up. That older man, that guy in his 60s, you could tell he was on guard for the rest of the time. Because nobody left. I mean, it's Starbucks, California, this type of stuff happens, right? You're not going to be like, that ruined my day. I don't even think I mentioned it on the podcast. Like, this type of stuff happens. I just remembered it because of this story. Like, that dude was just sitting there, and that guy thought he was calling him a child molester. Who knows why? I'm assuming that he actually wasn't doing that. I doubt these two people have ever crossed paths before, but sometimes you just are there and you get accused of doing something. It's obviously doesn't have, it's not like the main reason why people get assaulted, but it can happen. And in the case at Starbucks, it turned out to be nothing. But in the case here in Italy, it turned out to be permanent damage. Terrifying, terrifying story. Justin, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the Carpenter Copter. We are leaving behind Italy. Fly us all the way out to sunny, sunny California. It's the 1970s. We're in California. We don't have a specific location for this area. But we're about to meet this young teenage girl. We're going to call her Sally. We don't have her real name as well. And Sally, it's one of those families. This tale is as old as time. It's a good family, a strong family, but not a well-off family. Money was a struggle. It was a family of 5, and because money was tight, they all had to get jobs. And Sally and her family kind of had a sweet gig. Well, maybe the job doesn't sound that cool, but it worked out. Well, until the end of the story. They all got a job, or they all got jobs at an orange and nut orchard. So you'd be like trees as far as the eye can see, and like one tree has like almonds on it, and the tree next to it had some oranges. And they would like go pick, and they'd pick almonds and oranges all day long. Probably not all day long. There probably were labor laws. It's probably 8 hours a day, but picking some oranges, picking some almonds, pecans, what else? Other nut grows out of a tree? Pine cones. They were pulling nuts out of trees. And because of this, like part of their job was they got to live on an old house on the property. Sally, even after she was helping support the family like everyone else, they were all pitching in, she was able to put a money aside and she bought a horse. Oh, Buttercup, she says. She doesn't actually say the name of the horse, but we'll call him Buttercup. Oh, Buttercup, oh, you're such a fun horse. I'm going to brush your hair and I'm going to ride you around. Clippity-clop, clop, clippity-clop. I don't like horses, personally. I find them terrifying. But she didn't. Sally loved Buttercup, and she would ride the horse around. But because horses are so big, and they're not also the smartest creature on the planet, you gotta lock them up. You gotta lock them up in the stall. When Sally goes to school, Dad would always be like, did you lock the Buttercup up? Did you lock him up? And she'd be like, yeah, Dad, I locked Buttercup up in the stall. And Dad's like, well, okay, because I don't want to come home from a long day of picking oranges out of trees to find Buttercup running around. Now, to be fair, I don't know why I had such a problem with Buttercup running around. Again, they're not the smartest animals, and they can do a lot of damage, but the dad really was fixated on he didn't want Buttercup running around the property when no one was there. Maybe that's horsekeeping 101. You can't have him just running around the farm. But constantly getting trampled by it. He's like, oh, Sally, I had both my shoulders dislocated today because your stupid horse knocked over the ladder. I fell again. I fell into a pile of nuts, broke my back, popped my shoulders out of the joint. You got to make sure Buttercup's in that stall when you leave. And he would have to keep telling her that because every time she would come home from school, Buttercup would be wandering around the property. And the dad would be like, Sally, I told you so many times, lock Buttercup up in the stall. And Sally would be like, I did. I swear to God, I locked him up in the stall before I went to school. And the dad, it's this vicious cycle. He yells at Sally to lock the horse up. She does lock the horse up. She's not like just daydreaming. She's like, what did my dad say? It's just all covered in blood. He's being taken away by the ambulance. What's the thing my dad always said? I don't remember. Something about a locket or something, a necklace he wants. She would lock the horse up. She would go to school. When she'd come home, the horse would be running around the property, and the dad is getting madder and madder and madder. And one day, because obviously you're thinking like, so what's the actual mechanism here? Obviously we're talking about on a paranormal podcast, so I think you guys can kind of figure out what's coming. But when you're living in the moment, you're not like, yes, your dad is just a crumpled mass of bone and flesh. You're like, I wonder if this has a paranormal answer. You would constantly be thinking, I locked it. I know that I locked it. But somehow when I come home, the horse is running around. Well, I mean, she would lock it at one point. I don't know how he got out each time. In Sally's story, she goes, at one point I came and I actually saw the lock just sitting on the ground. But I'm sure other times, like, I don't know if he dematerialized through it or how he was getting out. That's the thing no one could figure out. Sally said, specifically one time I came back and the lock was just on the ground. The stable was open. I think other times maybe the lock wasn't on the ground, so it was less mysterious. And you could figure maybe I didn't lock it tight enough. Maybe I didn't lock it right. Maybe it's an old lock. You could kind of logically think of all these things. But after the after the 25th time of your dad being trampled by this horse, you would start to think, well, maybe it's not just, maybe I should buy another lock. Maybe I should start there. Well, one day Sally goes, okay, Buttercup, okay, I'm going to lock you up like I do all the time. And hopefully you don't get out, because my dad always yells at me when you get out. And she locks up Buttercup. She locks the door to the stable and pets him on the head and goes, good, Buttercup, good. I'll see you after school. And when Sally comes home from school that day, Buttercup isn't running around the property. Oh, that's cool. The lock works. Sally goes into the stall. Stall's empty. Buttercup. Sally's walking around the farm or the orchard. Buttercup. Buttercup, where are you? Buttercup. Can't find her prized horse. Until eventually, she sees Buttercup's lifeless body leaning up against the tree. Buttercup had a rope tied around its neck and then tied around the tree, suffocating him. Now, this isn't something she blamed her dad for. I would argue it would take Milo from Croatone to strangle a horse to death. It wasn't like hanging. It wasn't like hanging from a noose. It was as if you just tied him to a tree by the neck, tight enough that he suffocated. I don't even know how horse breathing muscles work, like where they are in the neck, how any of them. I figure it's very nose related because they have those big nostrils, but other than that. And the dad wasn't like, yeah, I got horse running around, so I strangled him. The dad had nothing to do with it. Sally never even thought her dad had anything to do with it. This would be so hard to pull off, to strangle a horse by tying its neck to a tree. It seemed like something darker was at play. But that wasn't the only odd thing that happened at this property. Sally's father, who we will call Philip, one day he's standing in the kitchen and he's like, I got away with that horse murder? No one suspected me. Philip's standing there in the kitchen one day of the house, this old house they're living in. Philip's standing in this kitchen, then all of a sudden, a cowboy walks into the room. Like, what? What's going on? He described this man as wearing like an old style Western getup. This cowboy is now standing in the kitchen and he tells Philip, I see what you guys have been doing around the property. And your wife? She's a good worker. I've never seen someone work as hard as your wife. You know what? Because I like your family so much, I got a deal for you. Weird, right? That's not the end of your story. You're like, wow, that's a cliffhanger. Philip's standing there and he is looking at this cowboy and he goes, I love the way your wife works. You got a good family. Good family. I got a proposition for you. Little do you know, or really anybody knows, that there is a hidden treasure somewhere in this house. Riches beyond your wildest dreams. And I will show you where it's at. On one condition. You can never move out of this house. You gotta live here forever. This house will be the only home you know from now on. And Cowboy disappeared. Almost immediately, Philip got his family together and said, we're moving out. Pack everything up. If you can't pack it up soon, you're leaving it here. Everyone's like, what? He's like, I'll explain when we're far, far away. Everyone packs stuff up. I don't think they moved out that night, but they moved relatively quickly. This was also their job, so all 5 of them had to get new jobs and a new home. In very short order, Philip got the family packed up. They moved from California to Kentucky. Start over anew. And they had heard, through the grapevine, that shortly after they had left, that old house in the orchard burst into flames and burned to the ground. Fast forward to the year 2015. Sally is now an adult. She's a mother with a family of her own. She travels out to California. And while she's in the area, she goes, you know what? I wonder if they ever did anything with that old property. I remember the house burned down. There's some good memories. There's some good memories there. There was one bad memory. My beloved horse was mysteriously strangled. But other than that, everything else was pretty grand. So while she's in the area, she goes to the orchard. And like she had expected, right? This was an orchard that was in operation. The house had been rebuilt. And she walked up to the door, knocked, and said, hey, I used to live here. You mind if I look around for a bit? Oh, yeah, people do this. People do this from time to time. Yeah, come on in. She looked around the house. She's like, oh, memories. Memories. She's looking out of that tree. She's like, I'm not a memory there. She's covering it up with her hand, but everything else here, memories. She goes out to the old barn. She's looking around. She's talking to the people who live there now. And they seem to be getting along pretty well. They seem to be getting along really, really well. She got the impression that the new residents of this house in the orchard were extremely wealthy. The person who posted this story online was Sally's daughter. She went online by the name Imira. Imira posted this story online, and she was telling the story that her mother had told her. So the family had been informed about the cowboy coming into the house and making this deal and say, you got to stay here forever. And really, when Sally went back to visit it, the implication is that this family that lives in the house now did take the cowboy up on his bargain. But you go, Jason, the house burned down. And then, I'm sure that would burn down the treasure. I mean, yeah. But that's if you're thinking of the treasure as technically being a physical treasure. I'm not saying the real treasure was the horse strangling we did along the way. I'm saying that the physical house was irrelevant. It was the place. It was the home. Not the physical building, if that makes any sense. Now, it's definitely possible people who own orchards, I know a couple orchard owners up here, they are wealthy. They own land. It's one of the most valuable assets you can have. And these orchards in operation, I know people who run cherry orchards up here, and very, very wealthy people. But the implication in this story is that the new residents of this home were also visited by the cowboy and were offered unlimited riches. Again, it's not like I buried $500,000, which is nothing to sneeze at, by the way, but it's not just that, it's unlimited riches. So it wouldn't be that you would then have to live in an old house. You could knock it down and put up a mansion, but you would have to live there forever. And that's an interesting bargain. That's a really, really interesting bargain. It doesn't sound super Faustian. It's not that you have to give up the soul of your firstborn. It's not that you have to sacrifice somebody. You're being told you will have riches beyond your wildest imagination. But the only catch is you have to live here forever. And it doesn't mean that you can't leave. And you can still, you're like, oh, I really want to go to Disneyland. Can I go to Disneyland? He's like, nope. You have to live here forever. But you can build Disneyland, knock down those orange trees, build a roller coaster. But you had to call that your home. It wasn't that you couldn't travel. It wasn't that you couldn't enjoy life. But you had to call that place your home forever. I mean, when I'm read the story, I'm thinking, ooh, what if when they died, like they see grandma up in heaven and they're like, Johnny boy, it's your grandma. I want to give you a hug. I want to give you a big old heaven hug. And Johnny's down there. He's like, I'm coming, grandma. I'm coming. And his soul starts floating out of his body. And the cowboy's like, nah, he's all shooting your angel wings with guns. The cowboy's like, nope, you have to live here forever, even your soul. And Johnny's like, no. Like, that's possible. You're like, Jason, that's like from Tales from the Crypt. That's all your Crypt Keeper voices. That's possible. We could take it to that level. But what if it's not super... What if there's no back-end trick to that? What if it truly is the cowboy saying... You will get all the money you want in the world. The only thing is you can't move away. And you go, well, when I die, can my soul go anywhere? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I'm not the devil. I'm just a cowboy ghost. Who do you think I am? He goes, yeah, when you die, you can still go to heaven. But while you're alive, you have to live here. And you're like, there's no catch. I can like leave the property whenever I want. And he's like, yeah. And you're like, can I have a vacation home in Malta? And he's like, yeah, I'll allow that. He's like pulling out his ghost contract. He's like, yeah, I'll allow that. You have to spend X amount of days at the haunted orchard for it to truly be your home. Like, I don't know. It's just an interesting story because you have to think, this is one of the stories, is what would you do if that happened to you? If a ghost cowboy, this might be the most specific hypothetical question ever asked. If a ghost cowboy showed up at your house tonight and offered you the same bargain, and you can ask him anything. Well, if a giant tsunami puts me 20 feet underwater, do I have to live underwater? He's like, no, I'm just a cowboy ghost. I'm not trying to trick you. I have all this gold that I want to share, but I don't want to be lonely, so I will give you. And maybe that is it, actually. I didn't think about that. That just kind of rolled off my tongue. What's the motive of the ghost? It may have just been that. He may have had access to this treasure. And again, is it a physical treasure buried in the ground? Because technically $500,000 in gold pieces is not riches beyond my wildest imagination. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. But it's not beyond what I've ever dreamed of. What if he was just a lonely ghost and he was able to manifest money? We do know that ghosts, paranormal is very common. Common in the world of paranormal. The grand scheme of things, we don't see it happen that much, but ghosts manifesting coins. But they're pennies, right? They're just a bunch of junk pennies. But what if you had a ghost who could manifest cash, gold, doubloons, or whatever for you, but he just didn't want to be alone? He'd been in this home all by himself for who knows how long, and he was going to make that deal. If there was no catch to it, would you make that deal? But here's the thing, you don't know if there's a catch, right? We know the stories of the deals with the devil, the Faustian bargains, making the wrong wishes to a genie, the monkey paw, all of this stuff. So if someone came to you with if a paranormal entity came with you with a legit bargain, you would be super suspicious. It's the same way if you get an email saying you're related to a Nigerian prince, we're going to go, that's obviously a scam. But to be fair, somebody out there is probably related to a Nigerian prince in hiding. And so for the one person that is actually true, there's this guy in Nigeria and like these militiamen are looking for him and he's like, dude, I got to get out of the country. I got to get out of the country. Do I have relatives anywhere? And they're like, well, we know this guy in Canada. He is like a second cousin of yours. He might be able to help us out. if he can deposit this check in his bank account, Your Highness, we can get you out of the country. But the banks have shut down all your accounts. And he's like, oh my God, we are going to really do a Hail Mary pass on this one. Send him an email. Let's see if I can leave this country. Like, that has to have happened at least once. But 99.9% of the time, you always hear that it's a scam. So is it possible that this was some sort of demonic entity and this family that's living there now? I mean, 2015, super recent, right? This would still be there. This house would still be there. The current people living there would most likely still be there. If they've made this bargain, have they got unlimited riches and there's no downside to it? You live in California. Boo-hoo. You know what I mean? You live on an orchard in California. There's worse places to depose Nigerian prince, for example. It's such a leap of faith, isn't it? What if there's no catch? Would you be willing to take that chance? If a ghost cowboy offered you unlimited money, the only catch is that you could not move away from your house. You have to live there forever, which is the terminology he used, which does make it seem like there is a catch, but we don't. No, and it really would be a leap of faith. You're putting a lot on the line with this ghost cowboy. You're really taking a big chance. But that's how we're going to end today's episode. Would you take that chance? Could you trust that there is no hidden agenda? Would you trade a possible life of damnation? Not guaranteed. Not guaranteed by any means. But would you possibly trade an eternity for unlimited riches on earth? And you don't know until you sign that contract or you agree to that. Even you can lay out all the terms, there could be something you didn't think of. And even if he did say this, that, and the other thing, no, all that's off the table, would you trust a phantom? It's a hypothetical question for all of us, but it's the reality for this family that currently lives in this house. And it will remain a hypothetical question until the day that they die. Then they will learn whether or not they were able to experience a life of luxury just by keeping an old cowboy ghost company. Or that they've traded paradise to be stuck here on earth, living as ghouls in an old house somewhere in a Californian orchard. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm glad you listened to it today. Have a great one.